The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. We're nearing the end of this very rich, provocative book by Father Spitzer, Science at the Doorstep to God, where he's presenting many, many different approaches, which all lead to the same conclusion that you can't explain human mind, you can't explain the existence of matter, of the universe, apart from some transcendent cause. He uses some interesting, more modern language, but he's describing what has been part of ancient philosophy from Plato, Aristotle on. So last time we had a great discussion that didn't cover too many pages, and we left before we began considering this section, which begins on page 173, section B, called the irreducibility of self-consciousness to physical processes. And on page 175 at the bottom, end of that paragraph there, he says, in order for the very same action to be grasped while grasping, it must be in two relative positions with regard to itself simultaneously. That is to say, if I'm talking to you now and I'm aware of the fact that I'm talking, I have to have two things going simultaneously. First, an awareness that I'm talking, of you, what I'm saying, and then an awareness of what I'm doing while I'm doing that. And he says that material things can't do that. They can't be in the same place at the same time doing the same thing. So that's sort of the kind of thesis which he unpacks here of the mind and self-consciousness, being aware of what is one's thoughts are, is something which cannot be explained within the natural order. Page 176. I want to say a word about quantum entanglement. Okay, We'll get to that more of that later, but the paragraph towards the bottom there, how can this be explained? Okay, one possible explanation is that information introduced into a quantum system, for example, a measurement affects the disposition of the whole system. Information introduced at one point affects potential measurements at all points in the system. Let me give the concrete example, which he's referring to. It's called the Bell inequality. You have two electrons that are generated at the same moment and going in different directions, and they're entangled, they're related to each other. Electrons have a thing called spin. It's not real spin, but they call it that because we have to use images to describe things we don't understand fully. And one of the mysteries of quantum mechanics is that spin can only be up or down, but until you measure it, it's both. It's not as if this particle had spin up and this had spin down, and so when you measure this one up, well, this is going to be down because they're opposite, Again, if you don't know it, take it on faith for now. But the mystery of quantum mechanics, one of them is that the particle is both up and down until you measure it. It's only when you measure it that it collapses into one or the other. So now you got two particles, and they both have spin up and spin down potentially. If you measure this one up, this one immediately becomes down. Okay.
And by measuring it, what instrumentation are you using to measure?
It's a physical instrument you have, which you can measure. Let's say it's a magnetometer because it's actually a magnetic thing.
Okay.
And this thing registers plus or minus on a magnetic thing.
Okay. And as soon as you do that, something that has the potential to be either will become something.
It will become one of the two. And immediately, this one then must become the other.
And the distance between the two doesn't matter, right?
It can be the universe wide.
Wow.
Now, so Yeah, so that's the first thing I found astonishing when you first mentioned it to me. That basically this defies or transcends or the Einsteinian understanding of things, that the speed of light is the absolute maximum, because we're now talking about simultaneous things happening that are not happening. There's no time required, therefore there's no speed. I mean, it's just absolute simultaneity, if that's the right
That's
word.
right. And that's why when he says here, how can this be explained? One possible explanation is that information introduced in a quantum system by, for example, a measurement affects the disposition of the whole system. So he's saying, well, when you measure this one, it affects the whole system. I'm sorry for this, that may be true, but the point is, information, according to Einstein, can't travel faster than the speed of light. So you may want to affect the system if you want, but if you do something here, the effect can't take place over here by the transmission of information in this world. Because in this world, as far as we know, all the tests that we try to do come out the same. You can't transmit information from point A to point B faster than the speed of light. But this is instantaneous under all systems, you know. Now, how can that be? I think, not just believe, I'd almost go as far as saying I know, that the only way that you can explain this phenomenon, which is a measurable, empirical phenomenon that all scientists who know anything about it will admit, is that the universe is in the mind of God. And for God, this point and that point are simultaneously for all eternity present. And so what's done here and what happens here doesn't have to wait for a material passage of the speed of light for an effect to take place. It's in the mind of God from the beginning. I honestly think that you cannot find a plausible explanation for the results of quantum physics without positing the mind of a transcendent being. I think quantum physics is one of the strongest proofs that there must be a God.
Yeah, well, certainly with the explanation of quantum entanglement that you've given there, it transcends physics. You know, it's metaphysics, right? Because it doesn't require the speed of light. It doesn't. It's not bound within Einstein's formula, E equals mc squared. It transcends all that. It's not physics. It's metaphysics. So, simply, I do have one question though, just to play the skeptic. How do we know that something that an electron is both or neither before we measure it? Because if by measuring it's the only way we find out what it is, how do we know what it is when we're not measuring it?
Yes, and that's very interesting. And there's a physicist named Merwin who devised an experiment that shows that. And by the way, this was a huge debate for almost a decade or more between Einstein, it's ERP, Einstein, Rosenfeld, a Polish name, and Bohm and not Heidegger, Heisenberg, because Einstein wouldn't accept this. He said, no, there must be a hidden variable. That is to say, when these two particles are separating, there's actually a variable in there that's going to make that one come out plus and this minus. We just haven't found it yet. Mm. And I forget the experiments they did, but they've done experiments which show that cannot be the answer. There are no hidden variables. Yeah, it's an interesting argument within quantum physics. But look up quantum physics hidden variables, and you'll see what I've forgotten. So I can't tell you myself. No, I would just say this: that there is scientific consensus among particle physicists that the qualities or the quantities or the measurable properties are there in all their possibilities until they're measured. I forget what the proofs are, but they're there.
Yeah, no, I wasn't denying that the proofs were there because it's such a fundamental question. It must have been asked. It's just that I can't get my head around the fact that you know what something is before you measure it, and so that you can say that it's this because I've measured it. I can't see the logical connection between how you can know one from the other. But I'm sure that they've asked the question and they've done experiments in order to satisfy themselves that it's answered.
Well, you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, right?
It's dead.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes.
It's both dead and not dead.
It's both dead and not dead.
Until you open the box, and then it's one or the other. But before you open the box, it's both.
Because this is a big joke,
It is a big joke.
About the cat being dead or not dead, or
not dead and not dead.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the thing.
But that's like defies the law of non-contradiction or something.
It does.
Yeah, that's the issue, right?
But there's a wonderful book by Wolfgang Smith is his name. I think he's an American, maybe German descent, Portland, Oregon, a physicist. It's called The Quantum Enigma. And fascinating book because what he says is that this is explained by Aristotle's idea of potential being. Matter is potentially everything. Prime matter is. It can be, a proton or a neutron or whatever, but matter is undifferentiated, unformed. It's the form which gives the matter. Until you apply the form, it could be anything.
Okay.
And so Wolfgang Smith is saying what these properties are not actual properties. They're potential properties.
Oh, okay.
And so
I can see you're saying that basically an electron is basically is defined as being magnetic. Then it's going to be negative and positive, and then you measure it, you'll find it's one or the other, but potentially it's both because it's a magnetic thing.
Right, and that's the other thing is that, because our minds we're in matter, and we can't think without images, even things like sounds, like words, and like pictures, and so on. We picture the Bohr atom as having these protons and neutrons in it, and we have the electrons spinning around it. That cannot be. I mean, you can't have an electric charged particle spinning around a positive charged particle without there being an enormous magnetic field, created by that. But that doesn't happen. So electrons aren't there until you measure them. Any electron is potentially everywhere in the universe, actually, until you go to measure it, and you find, oh, there it is. But it wasn't there until you measured it. It was your measurement that caused it to be there. I know this is mind-boggling, mind-boggling. But that's what the experiments show. Every experiment they've done to test these various quantum theories has shown that they're true.
Okay, I'll take it on faith. I'll take the science on faith.
But it's something. I'm an amateur at it too, but the thing is, it's interesting to read about this and reflect on it. Of course, there's a lot of different opinions among the physicists as well, but they all agree on the phenomena. It's the explanation. For example, there's the many universe explanation that every quantum measurement, which means that this now is up, it's down, it creates another universe, which is down. So every measurement creates another universe. Well, it's obviously, so there's actually books written by good physicists about this kind of stuff. But why do they do that? They're trying to explain, because the mind requires explanation, these phenomena. And they can't accept the fact there's only one universe in our order. It's in the mind of God. To me, that's an elegant, I would say even Occam's razor, the least complicated explanation of it. is that God is the one who creates eternally, and therefore everything is happening within his mind, and that he has established laws. What are laws, by the way? Where are laws? The laws, well, they got to be in a mind. You can't have a law that's not in a mind somewhere. So these laws are in God's mind. And that's the only way that you can plausibly, I think, explain the phenomenon. But it's like you try to explain how apes are thinking, by doing a spoon test and doing this test. It doesn't work. I'm wandering. We better get more than 2 pages this time. Let's go. Well, 278. He asked the question, section C.
178.
178. Is self-consciousness unique to human beings? And the answer is yes. Let's see. Oh, what I find interesting here in this chapter, never thought about this before, is that one way they're trying to test to see whether animals have a similar or same consciousness we do is, do you plan for the future? Because the future means we have to see ourselves as we are now and imagine ourselves in a situation in the future, and then take action now for the purpose of being ready in the future. Like, storing food or bringing a bag of tools with you, whatever.
Buying an airline ticket. That's one of the things I do often.
Yeah.
Buy an airline ticket.
And so the fact that humans buried other humans, first of all, they made tools, and then they stored food. Mm-hmm. And then because they weren't sure where people were going, they died, they put provisions in the grave. That these people infer from that, these beings had a sense of themselves in a future state, and therefore they did something now to prepare for it. We don't see that in any animal remains. We don't find, animals having airline tickets, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like that. Well, that's all I have on that section 2. Page 185. Anybody before 185?
Not me.
Here's another one. Trans-algorithmic mathematics.
Now, if you want to be intimidated by a subheading, that's it, right?
Yep.
Well, he speaks there about Gödel, G-O-umlaut-D-E-L, very famous mathematician in the early 20th century. And I've read about his proof. I've tried to read his proof. I've tried to read what he said about his proof. It is way beyond me. I get lost in the mathematical weeds. But what mathematicians and physicists will say is that he demonstrated that within any system of mathematics, that based on axioms and postulates, there are statements within the system that are consistent with the axioms of the system, but can't be proved or disproved within the system. You got to go out of the system. Mm-hmm. And so the Gödel's theorem is that there is no mathematical intellectual structure which is self-contained. It always requires something outside of it. And then if you say, well, let's create a second system that has this, we'll make that and we'll put that in there. Well, that system, anyway, again, I couldn't follow it, but if it's true, it means that the human mind cannot be reducible to physical limitations because no system is limited to what's within the system.
And as a result, That's what I'm on page 186. Gödel's proof shows, this is the middle paragraph, that human thinking is not only always beyond axioms, rules, and programs, but also capable of genuinely originative creativity. That is, capable of thinking without deriving from or making recourse to any prior axioms, rules, or programs. And so, yes, human ingenuity, human creativity, the fact that we make boxes and then think outside the boxes we make.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, go back to Einstein. E equals mc squared, right? This was one of his great mathematical axioms, which has been demonstrated presumably to be true, and no one's questioning it now. He discovered that the mathematical truth was already in place. He discovered it, but the process by which he discovered it required innovation, right? Creative thinking outside the box, doing things in a different sort of way in order to see things from a different angle, in order to come up with the equation that was always there, but which no one else had seen.
Yes.
Well, theism has often been criticized as a god of the gaps. That is to say, we thought eclipses were caused by God, and then we found out we believed in God. Then we found out, well, no, it's caused by the moon getting in the way of the sun. Okay, well, then that gap has been filled by science. And so all our belief in God is using him as a cause for things we can't explain. And the more we explain, the less we need for God. Well, it's not true that faith is a God of the gaps. Science is a science of the gaps, because why did Einstein come up with relatively special in general? Because we thought we'd explained the motion of bodies. Newton was the great originator of that, not originator, but kind of the synthesizer of all that knowledge, and we thought it explained everything. Well, all of a sudden we found things that didn't fit. So we better find something else to explain that, because Newton can't explain it. Mm-hmm. And so there's already things that where science is trying to fill these gaps. For example, I think I mentioned this before, but the matter and energy which physics studies is only 5% of what they claim to know exists. There is 25% of matter, of the 100% of matter. We have 5%. 25% is called dark matter. And dark just means we're convinced it's there. We can't find it. We can't see it. And then 70% is dark energy, which is simply saying, well, we think it's got to be there, but we don't know what it is. We can't measure it. So science also is trying to fill the gaps with knowledge which they don't have right now. But that, I don't think belief in God is a way to fill gaps in our knowledge. Belief in God, or knowledge of God through natural philosophy, is an unavoidable conclusion that you get from reflecting on science, physics, mathematics, life, experience, things, being, and you realize there's no explanation within the world. Therefore, because it requires explanation, there must be an explanation beyond the world, transphysical, as he says here.
Yeah, and the other thing, I mean, that analogy you're using there about science being a science of the gaps, in actual fact, when we're talking about this quantum entanglement, it's almost as if every discovery that science makes begs more questions than it answers. So in other words, that scientific discovery actually leads us deeper into numinosity, right? Deeper into mystery. So it's not as if, I mean, the idea of the theory of everything, this is the new sort of, the Holy Grail, right? But the point is that what we're seeing is if what physics has now discovered that we can only measure 5% of what's there, well, that means there's 95% of stuff that wasn't a mystery until fairly recently. Now we discovered that it's there. We don't know what it is. So we've now got 95% of physical reality, which we assumed didn't exist before, and now we have a 95% mystery to handle.
If humor is a positive characteristic of human existence, if mirth is something which is a good that we enjoy, then it must have its origin in God, the creator of everything, right? And as we've learned more and more about the universe moving outward, and then there's more and more, and there's so much more we now know or convinced that there's more than we can actually see there. What is it? Well, God has led us to the limits of our thought, in which we have to say, what's there is beyond us, Yeah. That's going bigger, going smaller to the atom, and then protons, and then quarks, and then gluons and mesons and leptons and so on. And now quantum indeterminacy and entanglement, we've reached a point where we say, we don't know what's going on. We know what's happening. We can't explain it. That's God saying, I'm here. But,
Well, it reminds me, of course, of Chesterton's novel, The Man Who Was Thursday, where the whole point of that novel is God is playing hide and seek with the philosophers, right? Those seeking him, God's playing hide and seek with them because one suspects he has a sense of humor.
Let's conclude this chapter.
Yes, because we're
trans-algorithmic. I talked about Gödel, conclusions. Well, in his final statement here, page 188, I'm waiting to get to this. As we shall see, this brings up the age-old question of dualism, that is, matter and spirit, which we will attempt to resolve through quantum theory. Okay, I'm waiting for that. We'll move on next session, try and get more pages done. Thanks for listening and watching. Don't go away.
Should we tell them what the next book is?
Oh, yes. The next book. How should we describe the next book?
Controversial.
Controversial.
Thought-provoking.
Thought-provoking. The question actually is not, but the alleged question is hell empty?
But that's not even what this book is about.
I know, but that's
what people think the book is about.
That's right.
So we want people to read the book for themselves and discuss it with us to come to see that that's not even the question this book is about.
That's right. The title is somewhat mistranslated, and I did the mistranslation myself. In German, it's dürfen wir hoffen, that may we hope that all are saved. And in English, we just put, dare we hope that all will be saved.
Which is a very different question.
Yeah.
May we hope is what von Balthasar is asking. May we hope? Well, it's what God hopes, because then the next part of the part that all men be saved is in quotation marks because it's directly out of Scripture.
That's right.
So basically, the title should be, May we hope what God hopes?
So that'll be our next book, Dare We Hope by Hans Urs von Balthasar. You can get it at your local Catholic bookstore, probably. If not, tell them to order it. If it's not there, go to ignatius.com. We have the same or better prices and the same or better delivery than the behemoth. Avoid the behemoth. See you next time. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.